Hello, dear friends. I hope you're doing really well. Let's continue reading. We are in the book of Numbers, chapter 20. Now, this chapter is also important in a sad way, just the way chapter 14, remember, chapter 14 is important because in that chapter, God judged Israel, God judged that unbelieving congregation, and God told them that they were not going to go into the promised land, but they were going to remain in the wilderness and die in the wilderness. Uh, so that happened in chapter 14. God said that the unbelieving congregation was not going to get into the promised land. But the only ones who were going to go into the promised land was Joshua and Caleb and the children of the unbelieving people. Now, this chapter is in a way similar because God is gonna something sad is gonna happen. Okay, something, and we're gonna see what it is. You're probably already know. Okay, let's see. Chapter Numbers 20. Okay. Then the sons of Israel, the whole congregation, came to the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Now Miriam died there and was buried there. Now Miriam is the sister of Moses. Now she died here. Okay, let's continue. There was no water for the congregation, and they assembled themselves against Moses and Aaron. The people thus contended with Moses and spoke, saying, If only we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. Why then have you brought the Lord's assembly into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die here? Why have you made us come up from Egypt to bring us into this wretched place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there water to drink. Then Moses and Aaron came in from the presence of the assembly to the doorway of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to them, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, and you and your brother Aaron assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it may yield its water. And it says, Speak to the rock before their eyes, that it may yield its water. You shall thus bring forth water for them out of the rock, and let the congregation and their beasts drink. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, just as he had commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock. And he said to them, Listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came forth abundantly, and the congregation of their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. Those were the waters of Meribah, because the sons of Israel contended with the Lord, and he proved himself holy among them. So it's sad because now we know that neither Moses or Aaron, they're not gonna get into the promised land either. So the unbelieving congregation is not gonna get into the promised land. Only Joshua and Caleb and the children of the unbelieving congregation. But Moses and Aaron, especially Moses, he's not gonna get. Well, both of them, they're not gonna get into the promised land either. Why? Because God told him here in this situation to speak to the rock. But what did Moses do? He lifted up his hand and hit the rock twice. And not only that, we can see that he lost his patience. He lost his cool. He said, Here, rebels, are we going to get water out of this? No, it was, it was not good. He lost his cool. He lost his patience. He disobeyed. He didn't talk he was supposed to speak to the rock, not to hit it. And he hit it twice. we can tell he was like angry, I can tell he was angry, he was not serving God the right way. God says himself, like he didn't, in that moment, it was for him to speak to the rock, but what Moses did, he lost his patience. He was bad. He was angry. It was not a holy thing, God says that Moses didn't believe him, and Aaron, so that happened too. And I always, dear friends, I always told God, why, why didn't he, let Moses in the promised land? Because after all the things that they've been through, all the things that have happened since God took them out of Egypt, all the things that they have happened, that have gone through, and all the difficult situations, it's kind of sad that Moses didn't make it to the promised land. I mean, he's going to see the promised land, but it's like sad. I think it's sad. And we know in the book of Deuteronomy that Moses mentions this. Moses says that he asked forgiveness to God, and he repeatedly, many times, asked God, please let me into the promised land. But God said, no, I don't want to talk about it anymore, And God made his decision, and it's a righteous decision because he's a righteous God. So it's kind of sad. It's like frustrating. Why, just in a moment, Moses lost his cool. He just lost it. And he did. He hit the rock. He was supposed to speak to it. The rock is an I don't know how to say it. It's a typology. Who is the rock? God is the rock. Jesus is the rock. And previously, because God told him to hit the rock previously, and he did, but in this situation, no, in this situation, he was supposed to speak to it, not to hit it twice, So no, it's just they Moses and Aaron, they did wrong, even though Aaron didn't hit the rock, but still, I guess he lost his cool too, and they said, oh, rebel people, are we to get our water out of this? So he doubted God too, in that moment. It's just this, how like I said, I used to think this was unfair, but who am I? Who am I? God is perfect. I am a sinner, and that's the thing. God asks, God's standard is perfection. And this moment, dear friends, this moment that Moses lost his cool and lost his patience, that was it, God judged him. God judged him because God is a righteous God. If God had said, oh yeah, Moses is okay, no, God is a righteous judge. God's standard is perfection. And yes, Moses had many difficult times, but God has been with him all the way, all the time. And God has been with Israel all the time. And did you hear how bad they complain this time? They say, if only we had perished when our brothers perished before the Lord. That's horrible, right? I mean, who says that? Like they would rather be dead, like die the way the others died in God's judgments, all the time that they've been in that wilderness. I mean, it's like crazy. They're crazy, I think. I don't know what happened to them. And now Moses loses his patience, and because of this, because he didn't listen, he didn't speak to the rock, he hit the rock. God is telling us here, he lifted his arm and he did, now he's not going to go to the promised land. So the thing is this, dear friends, there's another part that is related. I believe it's related. See how Moses was supposed to speak to the rock? Let's read this. This is in the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verse 10. Jesus answered, now this is when Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. See, that's the thing. That's why Moses, in this occasion, he was supposed to speak to the rock. Because that rock, Jesus is the rock. That rock, obviously that rock in Numbers, that's not Jesus, but it's a picture of him, of him, and how the water of the rock is the salvation. It's a picture of the salvation of Jesus Christ. I'm going to read it again. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. That's, when we believe in Jesus, we ask him to save us. Dear Jesus, you're my Lord, you're God, please save me. I believe in your death on the cross and your resurrection 3 days later, save me, We ask him and he saves us. And then he saves us, But unfortunately, we already know what happened. Not with Jesus, but with Moses. That's what I mean with Moses. He didn't speak to the rock. He hit the rock when he was supposed to speak to it. So that happened. And the consequences is Moses is not going to go to the promised land. So I'm going to read, this is the last thing that I'm going to read, just one or two verses. It's in Colossians 3:22. This is good for us to know, to remember. Oh, I don't like, why do they put it slaves? It's servants. Let me see. Let me see, King James. Servants. Okay, I'm going to read the King James. Servants and slaves, I'm going to read this. Okay, Colossians 3:22 now. I know it's easy to say and hard to be there. It must have been really hard for Moses, He was already, I don't know, tired of many things, tired of the congregation, But at that moment, the thing was to focus on God and not to focus on the people. And I know it's easy to say, hard to do, but this is something that's these two verses are very good. I'm going to read. Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart, fearing God. And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not unto men. So this is so important. I know it's easy to say, hard to do, but all the things that we do, dear friends, is like we're doing it for God, not for the people. Many times we have to deal with difficult people, difficult situations like Moses, but everything that we do should be as if we do it for God. And remember this, and don't forget that section is in Colossians 3:22. There is a similar part in Ephesians, and remember this, that God is a righteous God, and He will always judge perfectly. And we are not. We are subjective. We say you good. We have two people doing the same thing, but we judge one. We don't judge the other. We are not righteous. God is. He's righteous judge. And He not only is a righteous judge, but He's loving, merciful, and you already know the salvation. To believe in Jesus Christ and His Son, the Son of God. He's the Son of God. He's God in His death on the cross, His resurrection 3 days later. That He's God, and we give our lives to Him, and He saves us. And we should keep our relationship with Him every day, praying to Him, giving thanks to Him, asking Him for help, and reading His Word. Okay, so I'm finished, and hopefully tomorrow we'll continue. Bye-bye.